Okay, so greetings, welcome back to the Philosophy Club here at Little Patette, the centre of old ancient France, and we have a sign not far from here which says the centre of France, so now you know for a fact. So welcome to guests here and online. It's spring, it's more or less officially here, it's beautiful, we've got sunny weather, a bit warmer. We had a great music club for Imbolc to usher in the spring in the Druid style. And let's hope that the worst of the winter's over. We had a final flurry of snow just before Imbolc, which is like the winter saying, oh, I haven't gone yet. But we hope there's no more coming. So I'm going to start with just a sort of roundup of what I've been up to and what the state of the world is, really. This is my letter from the cosmos, like Alistair Cook used to do a letter from America. He's sadly no longer with us, but it's a shame because somebody ought to be doing a letter from America again. There's a weekly radio show on BBC that was like full of news of what's going on in America that you don't read in the papers. Somebody could volunteer to do that, please, because it's a bit crazy over there. Anyway, here in the centre of France, centre of Europe, here in the Peace Museum, what have I been working on is very important, which is the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. We have this journal that comes out called the Love Journal, and it's the only academic journal in the world on the nature of love. And it's had 13 issues so far, and it's coming out in its 14th edition, which goes to all the members of the Institute. And it's really going to be a bumper issue, the best ever edition. I've just included in there carefully selected, information, reviews. There's a whole field of love studies blossoming in Scandinavia. There's the Swedish academics are very much into love studies. There are pockets of it in the UK. When I launched the journal back in 1993, there was only one guy in the world really interested in love studies, an American academic teaching in California. And I took the view that if we're an institute for peace and global philosophy, what's the most important thing is help revive an understanding of love. Because through friendship, all different kinds of love, friendship, familial love, love between parents and children, friends, lovers, married couples, the whole works, and also between nations and different classes in society. So there's going to be lots of interesting stuff in that journal, which I'm now working on. It should be out in the next month, if all goes according to plan. I've just been researching and doing a review of The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm, who was a great psychologist, psychoanalyst back in the 60s and 70s. Which is a masterpiece of a little book. And I was researching his personal life. He was married to a very interesting Jewish analyst who was a student of Freud and who was a specialist in schizophrenia. And she discovered that you can actually treat schizophrenia with psychoanalysis, which was pioneering stuff, because most people nowadays just say schizophrenia is untreatable. You just drug people who've got it. But she was saying, no, therapy helps. And the talking cure. So that's very interesting, and that was Erich Fromm's wife. So yes, anyway, lots in that journal that's coming out. And then I want to say that yes, of course, we've just had Valentine's Day, which is the day of the year we can celebrate love. And I hope everyone sent or received Valentine's Day cards. It's a nice custom. And it goes back to ancient Rome. It's a pagan custom, the Lupercalia. We all need love in our lives, and you have to give as well as receive. And I've been revisiting. So I'm also busy with the commentary on St Matthew's Gospel, which is going to be about 500 or 600 pages long. It's going to be a huge work. And I recorded it at the Castle of the Muses in Scotland when I was just, a busy RE teacher, and I felt that I was trying to get my students to read a gospel, and of course they were very resistant to this idea, so I thought if I did commentaries on them, they maybe listen to the commentaries and then we'll read them. Matthew's Gospel is absolutely fascinating. It's the first in the New Testament. And in The Chosen, the character of Matthew is brilliantly played. He was a tax collector running a kind of toll booth in the village of Capharnaum, which is where Jesus had decided to set up shop. It's brilliantly enacted in this movie, The Chosen, a kind of Netflix series. And Matthew is brilliantly played. So if you want to know, they did a lot of research for that programme. He was a learned man. He was Jewish. He understood Latin. He could probably speak Greek as well as Hebrew and Aramaic. He was also good at maths. So his gospel is full of interesting stuff. And I've been commenting on it all. I'm also, and Herod casts a long light, a shadow over the beginning of the gospel because of his treatment of the Magi who come looking for the baby Jesus and they don't find him, and Herod therefore decides to kill all the children in Bethlehem. So I've been reading and studying the most important historical biography of Herod, who's a fascinating character. He was he was a practitioner of realpolitik, as we would say in German. He had met Julius Caesar, he met Augustus, he met Antony and Cleopatra. He was himself not Jewish, he was an Arab from Idumea. He was a master builder, he was a practitioner of the spectacle. He built the great temple in Jerusalem, which Jesus would have known and walked along in. And the Wailing Wall is still the remains of Herod's temple. He built Masada and all kinds of other extraordinary places. He believed in naked power, and he believed that by keeping order, that was the best way to maintain peace. The Jewish community was split into different factions. He was there as Rome's appointee to keep order, and he did it ruthlessly. He was married 10 times. He killed several of his wives and their children when they showed independent thinking. That was a threat to his idea of order. So he was ruthless. He would murder and kill people. So killing the babies in Bethlehem, that's typical Herod. Although the work I'm reading by an American historian says maybe he didn't, maybe that's just later Christian propaganda. So I suspend judgment. I think I don't put it past him to be that violent. And he's, a ruthless character, of whom there are many still roaming the planet. We've got too many Herods about. I've got to the bit in the Matthew's Gospel where the Beatitudes are happening, the Sermon on the Mount, we call it in English, and that's been really interesting to comment. And I've been looking at the original English translations in John Wycliffe's Bible and John Tyndale's Bible, because the phrase, blessed are the poor in heart, for they shall see God. Where does this blessed come from? And it was there in Wycliffe, it was there in John Tyndale. But I think it should have been happy are they who, because the Greek term is actually about happiness, whereas the term blessed is a bit problematic in English. It's sort of going towards sanctification and being blessed. In fact, it's a technical term. If you're a saint, you're a blessed somebody or other. And the average person can't relate to that. Whereas if I think Jesus was teaching happiness, and that makes much more sense to normal people. And I think we would have had a less tumultuous form of Christianity had the translation been different. Because that led me to quote Aristotle. So I've been going back over my commentary, and I quoted Aristotle talking about happiness in his Ethics, the Nicomachean Ethics, which is a classic of philosophy. If you want to study philosophy, and there's one book you can do, read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. He says that the goal of philosophy is to reach happiness. The goal of ethics is to reach happiness. The goal of human life is. And he says, well, what is happiness? It's, and he defines it. He goes into it in great detail, and I quote that in the commentary. He says that true happiness is action in conformity with virtue. So when you act in a virtuous way, there's a sense of happiness arises. If you help somebody out, you give a donation to a charity, you resolve a conflict or whatever, a kind of sense of happiness arises. Why is that? Because the soul is active in virtuous actions, says Aristotle. And the soul is the locus of actual happiness. Yes, there's physical happiness, a great meal, great sex, great music, whatever. But ultimately, the only abiding form of happiness, says Aristotle, is in the soul itself. And the highest form of happiness for the soul is contemplation, he says, which is when the soul looks within and finds within the source of its own happiness. Where does it find that? Well, in its immortality, in its rational function, reason, or the nous, which is immortal, says Aristotle. That is the source of our true happiness. And that survives death. If you read elsewhere in Aristotle's canon, that's the soul, right? So the point I make anyway is that this is exactly what I think Christ was saying. If you read the Beatitudes with an Aristotelian lens, it's exactly the same. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay, so those who have a pure heart, and that, by the way, in the Lollard text was, blessed are those with a clean heart, for they shall see God. If you clear your mind or your soul, then that immortal sort of connection is made, and that leads to true happiness. So anyway, it's fascinating, and that I think is why we have in the medieval European academia, beginning in France, but it spread around, was the Christians just rediscovered Aristotle and read these texts and said, my God, he must have been a progenitor. So I think whether Christ himself had ever studied philosophy as such, the jury is out. It is possible. I think there's a lot of evidence he went to Alexandria, and that was a school for philosophy, both Platonic and Aristotelian at the time. So I'm talking also about John the Baptist and his initiation of Jesus. It's fascinating stuff, revisiting it all. The Middle East is still in turmoil. What's changed in 2,000 years? It's like nobody's been reading these Gospels. Nobody's been studying their Aristotle, because the best way to create happiness in yourself is to create happiness in others, says Aristotle. You can't have it just for you, and then there are other people suffering. So, and the greatest philosophers, both in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, have all based their thoughts on Aristotelian ethics. Maimonides in Judaism. I don't think the extreme Zionists around Likud have been reading their Maimonides recently, or any philosophy. So anyway, at least we still have the ceasefire holding. More hostages have been released, so that's good news. By the way, the word gospel means simply good news. From Greek, God's spell was the Anglo-Saxon for good news. And a spell is is a sequence of words that bring information. And it's an interesting word. I've gone into all that. We don't yet have I want more than just a temporary ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. I want a proper permanent peace treaty between both the political powers, like the State of Israel, the State of Palestine, and so on, a two-state solution. But I want more than that. I want a religious ceasefire, because it is a holy land for Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. I want a proper ceasefire between these religions, signed by their religious leaders, the chief rabbis of the Jewish faith, the chief imams of Islam, and the chief bishops, archbishops, and cardinals of the Christian church. I think that's got to happen if we're going to get a lasting peace in the Middle East, because millions of people follow those teachings, and if they can come together and sign an interfaith peace treaty like that, it would be a tremendous sign that their followers pledge not to attack each other. And to speed that up, I've actually written a text. It's called the Interfaith Peace Treaty, which I'm urging responsible religious leaders in all those faiths to sign. And you can just Google it and find it online. It's even been translated into Arabic to make it easier. Still waiting a volunteer to translate it into Hebrew, but it's in Italian, it's in Russian, it's in Japanese, it's in German, it's in French. So more volunteers, please. I want it in Hindi. So that is the Interfaith Peace Treaty that I think is the blueprint for getting the Middle East turmoil to calm down. We've also got whispers in the wind of a potential ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, long overdue. If Trump can pull that off and talk to Putin, and if he can do it in a way that doesn't totally annoy and alienate the Europeans and the Ukrainians, then that will be a masterpiece. And let's pray that succeeds. So that's good. The other thing I've done this week is attend a roundtable with the Liberal Democrats, which I belong to. It's a sort of moderate centre-left party in England, or the UK. And we had a roundtable on the rise of right-wing populism. I gave a presentation, a sort of couple of slides, which I can send to anyone that's interested. It was a very good discussion afterwards. And it's very interesting, this word liberal. It has a bad press in some quarters. But rereading Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, he says to be liberal is a virtue, because it has a meaning of being generous, of giving. And that is the meaning in the English language. If you say somebody is a liberal person, it means he's kind, generous, giving. And that's the original meaning of the term. It also meant someone that followed the god Liber, which is freedom or liberty, and who believes in liberty and freedom. The Liberal Party in Spain and France and Britain in the 18th century was the party of people that believed in free thought, free speech, freedom of assembly, and all those classic liberal values and virtues. But it's premised on an idea of generosity. And ultimately it goes back to the same root as the word love. Libido comes from the same root. So a liberal is someone that wants to create a society based on love, but not forced love, a la Stalin or Hitler, but love that is freely given and received. And whereas the threat to Europe and the threat to all people that value that freedom of genuine love, is the idea of forced compunction, illiberalism. So anyway, I think Aristotle is definitely on the side of the liberals. I just want to say that, and a great thinker he was. So we had a good discussion, actually. And I discovered, a couple of things, newsflash. So the current Prime Minister of Ireland is from a Liberal party, and he is the current leader of the Republic of Ireland. There's a big discussion going on in Ireland, should they or shouldn't they join NATO? Traditionally, Ireland is a neutral country. It deliberately didn't join NATO. It stayed out of World War I and World War II. It doesn't have a big army. It doesn't want a big army. But there are people trying to bully and suggest that Ireland should become a normal country with an army and join NATO and all that. Whereas my friends in Ireland, like Dr. Sean English and many others, are saying, no, we don't want Ireland to do that. We believe in peace. We're neutral. We don't want to go down the joining NATO route, much as we, feel very sorry for the people of Ukraine and support their struggle. So I've written a letter to the Irish Prime Minister, basically because there's a lot of pressure on him to ditch Irish neutrality and join NATO. And I'm saying, no, actually, Liberal Democrats across Europe, we don't want you to do that. We want you to enhance Ireland's neutrality and peacemaking mission in the world. Ireland does great peacekeeping missions. And become a soft superpower of peace rather than a small little, military state. Because you lived through the time of Troubles, you came out of that civil war in Ireland, and you have tremendous expertise in peacemaking and mediation. So I've written to the Prime Minister saying, look, don't go down becoming another militarised European state. Stay with your peace testimony and create a cabinet post of a Minister for Peace in Ireland. Create a department of peacemaking and help us build a European Union mediation service, which we need desperately. I called for this, back in 2009, and anyway, we'll see what they say, because I mean, the current president of Ireland is a poet and a writer, an intellectual, and I pointed out, look, the Irish are brilliant at the arts, culture, poetry, philosophy, spirituality. In the Dark Ages, they gave rebirth to European Christianity with their wandering monks, founding monasteries all over France and Austria. Like Salzburg, one of my favourite places in Europe, was founded by a wandering Irish monk. So what we need is a rebirth of that spiritual witness from Ireland. And we'll see if that, I'll see if that letter, if you see an Irish Minister of Peace being announced, there we are, he did it. I am part Irish, you see, and obviously the Druid tradition in Ireland was a peace tradition. And the Druid intellectuals who kind of were appointing the kings, actually, we were not allowed to fight. We were just into the peacemaking. And I just want to say also, I note with interest that there's a new vice president of the European Union who's Estonian, Kaja Kallas from Estonia. She's now the High Representative for European foreign policy as a whole. She's a young lady born in 1977. She's won a prize from the Academy of Athens. I didn't know there was one, but there's a Lord Byron prize for Hellenistic values, because he was a great hero to the Greeks and a poet. So anyway, I hope that she might be interested in the European Union Mediation Service, finally. Because, it's long overdue that we have a technical branch of the European Union that is about peacemaking and using the expertise of our nations to find ways of solving problems like the Ukraine-Russia war, the Israel-Gaza conflict, and so on. Because by allowing these violent conflicts to go on, it leads to huge turbulence on the borders of the EU, which leads to violence all over the place. So anyway, that's a bit of what I've been up to this week. It's been full on, as usual, but all in a good cause, I think. Yes, any questions, comments? What have I left out?
Yeah, I had one, but it's gone.
I didn't mention, yeah.
I give one, so maybe it will come back. About the Gospel of Matthew.
Yes.
In French, c'est heureux. So it's like,
like
happiness, yes.
Heureux,
les doux, heureux. But there is one point among this litany of heureux and happiness to people who are crying and suffering. There is that quote.
Yes.
Because he recognized that the pain is part of humanity, but he promises that there is a way to find peace, even if we are disappointed or suffering from physical or mental illness or whatever. So that's the point. I think it's crazy, because listening to what you said about Aristotle, in a way, it made me think about non-duality. That you have love, you have so many suffering and things that happen in one's life.
Yeah.
But besides that, or mixed with that, there is something.
There's pain.
That is gold, or the treasure of the realm. I don't know how to say that, but I think the Gospel of Matthew, both, and Aristotle, I didn't read it, but I listened to what you said and expressed that. Yes.
Yes, there's one passage in the Nicomachean Ethics where Aristotle mentions gold. He talks about, people get happiness from wealth, and they can accumulate lots of wealth, and what's the best form of wealth? Well, gold. But all that is impermanent, says Aristotle. The only true wealth that endures is essentially intellectual wealth, your spiritual wealth, which is your inner knowingness and your ability to fuse and interpenetrate the divine mind, really, to put it in English. That's the source of true wealth, which of course is exactly Christ's point. It's as if he'd been reading Aristotle. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about the it's mountains sermon or whatever.
Sermon on the Mount, we call
Sermon
it
on the
in English.
Mountain, and in Scandinavian, it's preach. The preach on the mountain.
How do you say that in Norwegian?
Bergprekenen.
Okay.
Bergprekenen. That's yeah.
The Norwegian term for it, yeah.
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 And it's not the salig they are pleased who carry a heavy burden, they shall be relieved.
Yeah.
They are pleased. They are not sanctified or anything, but
No, it doesn't have that meaning of blessed. I mean,
No.
the phrase blessed is slightly ambiguous in English. Yes, but no, the point about the blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted,
yeah.
I think is, it's the sort of idea of Jung that you have to be prepared to look at the dark, you have to look at the suffering, the pain of the world, in order to then dive through it and reach release. And feeling is not something to be afraid of. People often say of Aristotle that he was just an intellectual and didn't know about feelings, but that's not true. He deals a lot with feeling and emotion, but what he's saying is that our highest mind, he calls it reason, is the immortal part of us, and therefore we should take our emotional burdens to that, because that's the voice of God in our conscience, if you want. But if you mourn, I mean, look at the suffering of the people in Gaza. 60,000 people, they now say, have died, many of them children and women. We should be mourning as a planet for this. We should be mourning for the 1,200 Israelis who died and the hostages that have been kept in inhuman conditions, because it's not about quantity. Each soul, each human is priceless. Each human is the whole world. So if, as a planet, we could mourn all this, in time, we might stop doing it. People in Russia whose children are coming back in body bags, parents, a lot of people have been killed, Russian soldiers, in North Korea and in Ukraine. I mean, we need to mourn for all this, because it's all unnecessary, and it's the result of fanatical, wealthy egotists, in my opinion, who are the heralds of the day, who are doing real politic and using violence, and inflicting, and apparently have no capacity to mourn properly. So, thanks for raising that. Yeah.
When soldiers or people just become a pawn in a game they are playing, that's the worrying thing. You lose your farm.
Absolutely, yeah.
You lose your peasants. So we got plenty more to go.
No, you become you just become a
Senseless.
sort of pawn in somebody else's game, as you rightly say. I mean, what turned me into a peace activist was working in a Canadian military hospital with old soldiers who'd fought in World War I and World War II. I was against war. My family was sort of peace-oriented, and we used to go on peace marches and stuff, but I didn't really understand the human devastation it causes. I was nursing old soldiers who were still traumatized, physically and mentally, by their experiences in the war. It leaves a lasting scar. And multiply that by the millions in World War II and World War I. And now we're still doing it. There'll be generations of people who've been traumatized by this conflict, and in Israel and in Ukraine and Russia. This is not necessary. We have to turn to that divine intelligence that is beyond this. And that's why we need to create institutions that can enact that intelligence, like in the EU, in the UK government, and in Ireland and elsewhere. And in America, where I've called for a nonagon to be built. So anyway, that's that's kind of how we can apply philosophical wisdom from the past to heal our world. Let's have a look at what the periodic table can teach us today, because this is always very exciting. Yes. Ha. Right, have you chosen one?
I've been looking at 152 philosophy, Stoicism.
Oh, okay, that's a good choice. Yes. Ah, right. Ha. Now. Ha. Did you study philosophy at school in Norway? Is it part of the curriculum?
No, not as such, but we were by the philosophers and the old Greek philosophers, but there was no study as such.
No, no. But you've met Norwegian philosophers. I mean, friends with.
Yeah.
It's sort of in the culture a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Have you got one?
Yes. The primal Egyptian.
Ah, number 4.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Well, we'll do 152 first. It came up first. So, Stoicism comes from the Stoa in Athens, which was a particular walkway around in the centre of Athens where the philosophers used to meet, talk to their students. They would have discussions there, hence the Stoa. It was founded by a famous figure called Zeno of Citium, which is a place in Cyprus. And it was founded sometime after Aristotle's had come and gone and done his teaching, and Plato as well. And in that time, around about 108 BC was when Zeno was active, founding it. People, I mean, they loved Aristotle's teaching. They could read it. They had the scrolls and texts. There were no books. They had scrolls. They loved Plato, to bits. Amazing. But they wanted something you could hold on to in your ordinary everyday life and enact. They wanted something a bit simpler, because to really master Platonism is like a huge lifetime commitment to studying obscure legends and just like who's who in the dialogues, what's going on here. It's really complex. And studying Aristotle is just like another lifetime's commitment to studying really complex prose and working out all his arguments in detail. And there were schools of Aristotelian thought going, but you had to be like a professional philosopher to really make sense of it all. What the Stoic tradition was let's synthesize and sublimate and summarize all that in a way that ordinary people can understand and relate to. And that was the genius of Zeno of Citium, who wrote a book, by the way, on love, which has not come down. It's one of the lost books of the burning of the Library of Alexandria. If anyone's found a copy or has a copy, please send me a copy and I'll review it for the Love Journal. Basically, he said love is the active force behind the universe. And we should act in honourable ways that conform to that. And he argued that the divine mind, reason, nous, is the essence of what people call the gods. The gods is a poetic way of talking about it. Like Hegel said, picture language. He wasn't against religions. And nor was Aristotle, by the way. It's fine, if people want to worship gods in the temples. But the best way to worship God is in your own mind, is finding the divine intelligence within yourself. And when you do